that this is the best movie they've watched
Oh, no.
all year because of everything that happened, and you're in the middle of it. I mean, can you see what they were talking about, and how do you feel about a comment about that?
Yeah. I think what happened to us this season, you don't see in the span of someone's whole career.
Let me tell you something. On day one of free agency, the Indiana Fever fan base completely lost it. Total meltdown. People were practically writing farewells, posting goodbye messages, and someone probably already had a tribute graphic ready to go. And the funniest part? The deal had already been handled. Sophie Cunningham was never leaving. She was always coming back. The front office was thinking several moves ahead while the fans weren't even on the same board. They were just spiraling into panic. But before we break all of that down, before we get into what really went on behind the scenes, the cap strategy, and the second enforcer they're targeting who's about to make things very interesting, you need to understand who Sophie Cunningham actually is. Because if you see her as just a shooter, you're completely missing it. Drop a comment right now. Are you excited to have Sophie back? And stick around, because I'll reveal the second enforcer this team is eyeing, and it fits perfectly. Let's get into it. Sophie Cunningham isn't just a basketball player. Obviously she is. But that's not what sets her apart. What makes her different is something you simply can't teach. You can't recruit it, draft it, or build it through film sessions or drills. It's pure competitive fire. It's the kind of presence that fills a locker room before she even speaks. It's the stare she gives an opponent after they take a cheap shot at her teammate, and they know, without question, that there's a response coming. People around the league have talked about it. People inside the Fever organization have talked about it. When Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA and teams made it their mission to test her physically, Sophie Cunningham became the answer to that message. We'll get into exactly how that played out on the court in a moment, but first, take in what coaches and players have said about her, because it tells you everything. She's a dog. She's a competitor. That's not just coach talk. That's someone describing exactly who she is. When I talk about effort, that is Sophie Cunningham. That's not a throwaway line. That's someone pointing to her as the standard for the culture they want. And then there's the line that really sticks, something you can't teach. Because when you think about today's WNBA, analytics, development systems, efficiency metrics, shot tracking, and then someone looks at Sophie Cunningham and says, nope, and she exists outside of all that. That tells you everything. Now let's rewind to April 11th. Free agency opens. The Fever fan base is glued to their screens, refreshing nonstop, waiting for news, and the signings start coming in. Kelsey Mitchell, signed. Lexi Hull, signed. Billings, signed. Tayasha Harris, signed. Great. Everything looks solid. The core is returning. And then, nothing. No Sophie. Minutes pass. Then an hour. People start posting. And this is where it turns almost comedic, because the reaction online was instant and completely over the top. Within hours, fans had convinced themselves that Sophie Cunningham was gone for good. Then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. Sophie posted on Instagram a photo with a caption along the lines of, "Bet on yourself." That's it. And the fan base took that single post and sprinted in completely the wrong direction. People read it as a goodbye, as a sign she was leaving to be valued elsewhere, as confirmation Indiana had let her walk. Full panic mode. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, was chaos. The Fever subreddit felt like a group therapy session. And honestly, if you didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, you probably would have panicked too. It looked exactly like what people thought it was. But here's what was really going on. The Fever front office, led by Amber Cox and her team, wasn't handling just one negotiation on April 11th. They were managing multiple at the same time. And Sophie Cunningham's deal? It was basically done before free agency even opened. The reason it wasn't announced right away wasn't because anything went wrong. It wasn't stalled negotiations. It was strategy. They were running parallel tracks, watching the frontcourt market closely. Specifically, two players, Alana Smith and Azura Stevens. Two versatile physical frontcourt players who could have given this roster exactly what it needs: size, toughness, and defensive presence alongside Aaliyah Boston. The Fever had to see where those players landed before finalizing their cap situation and frontcourt plan. That's called competent management. That's understanding how every roster move connects. and why you don't finalize one piece until you know how the rest fits. So, what happened? Alana Smith, who was a co-defensive player of the year candidate in 2025, signed with the Dallas Wings on a 3-year deal worth about $1 million annually. Max contract. Indiana passed. But Gazura Stevens signed with the Chicago Sky, also for max money. Indiana passed again. And once those options were off the board, once the front court market settled and Indiana knew exactly where they stood, the Sophie Cunningham announcement dropped on April 12th. Not because they finally figured it out, because they already had and were just waiting for the right moment. While fans were writing her exit story in real time, the front office was simply letting the market play out. Two completely different realities. Now let's talk about what Sophie Cunningham actually brings, because her shooting alone makes the case, but it's honestly just one part of the bigger picture. Start with the three-point shooting. It's elite. She shot 43% from deep in the 2025 season. That's not just good. That's top tier. I'm one of the most reliable long-range threats in the league. But the stretch that really stands out? From July 11th to August 15th, she shot 53% from three. 53%. And not on low volume. This was with at least 30 attempts, meaning defenses knew it was coming, she was being actively used, and she still hit at that level. The best in the WNBA during that stretch. That's not just a hot streak. That's historic. And here's what that does for the Fever offense. It creates a two-way pressure point that defenses can't solve cleanly. If you sag off Sophie to clog the lane and stop Caitlin Clark's drives, she punishes you from deep. If you stay tight on Sophie to take away the three, Clark gets more space, cleaner lanes, easier pull-ups, more control. There's no easy answer, no safe rotation. Every possession forces the defense into a bad choice, and Sophie Cunningham is the reason that choice exists. But what she brings goes far beyond shooting, and that's exactly why her role on this team is completely unique. Indiana Fever fans know it. Anyone who's really followed this team understands it. Caitlin Clark plays through contact. She attacks crowded spaces, initiates collisions, draws fouls, and operates inside where the physicality is constant. She takes hits, she gets grabbed, she gets pushed around. And early in her WNBA career, opposing teams clearly picked up on a pattern. If you make Clark uncomfortable physically, if you crowd her and play her aggressively, you can throw off her rhythm and potentially swing the game. The league saw it, and teams leaned into it more. And then Sophie Cunningham stepped in and changed the equation. There's a moment from June 2025 against the Connecticut Sun that tells you everything. Clark takes a hard hit, borderline flagrant. Before anyone can even fully react, Sophie grabs J.C. Sheldon. It's physical. It's intentional. It's a message. She gets ejected, and she couldn't care less, because that was the point. It wasn't about staying in the game. It was about making sure the entire league understands something very clearly. If you go after Caitlin Clark, there's a cost. You want to play rough with her? There will be consequences. And those consequences show up in the form of 5 feet 10 inches of pure commitment to protecting her teammate. That's the enforcer role. And it goes beyond those heated moments. It's about deterrence. It's about opponents stepping onto the court already aware that Sophie Cunningham is out there, and that reckless play won't go unanswered. That mental edge is real. It matters. And it's something you'll never see in a box score. Now, there was also some discussion about whether Sophie was actually satisfied with this deal, and it's a fair question. She had openly talked about wanting long-term security heading into free agency, a multi-year contract, stability, clarity about her future. Instead, she signs a 1-year deal. So naturally, people wonder, is this something she had to settle for, or something she chose? And the answer is pretty clearly the second. Because playing alongside Caitlin Clark isn't just a basketball opportunity, it's a completely different level of exposure. Clark has shifted the entire economic landscape of the WNBA. Being her teammate means more visibility, more media attention, more endorsement potential, and a level of spotlight that very few situations in the league can offer. You're playing in the Midwest, in a market fully locked in on this team, alongside the most talked-about player in women's basketball. That brings value that doesn't show up in contract numbers, brand deals, partnerships, media presence, recognition that players elsewhere simply don't get access to. And then there's Sophie's own reaction after signing. Let's get spicy. That's not someone settling. That's not someone forcing optimism. That's someone who knows exactly what this situation offers and is fully bought in. Now let's talk about why the one-year deal isn't just acceptable. It's actually the smartest move for everyone involved. To understand that, you have to look at what Indiana is building toward and why maintaining cap flexibility right now is going to matter massively in 2027. Kelsey Mitchell is also on a one-year deal. One of the league's top guards, also short-term. At first glance, that seems odd. But here's the context. The new collective bargaining agreement includes what's being called the EPIC provision. And what that does is make Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston eligible for massive contract extensions, far beyond what the previous system allowed. We're talking about an entirely new financial tier. And when those deals come up, Indiana needs the flexibility to pay them. If you lock role players into long-term deals right now, you create a cap crunch in 2027 that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to keep your stars at their true value. So these one-year deals, for Mitchell, for Sophie, aren't a sign of hesitation. They're intentional. It's calculated cap management. The only exception is Lexi Hull, who's on a multi-year contract. But that works because she's younger, on a more affordable deal, and won't interfere with the cap space needed for those major extensions. It's the same kind of strategy players like Kelsey Plum have used, taking shorter deals to maintain flexibility. This front office is playing the long game. And these one-year contracts, they're setup moves. Now look at the guard rotation for this Fever team. It's loaded. You've got Caitlin Clark running the offense, arguably the most impactful player in the league, creating advantages the moment she crosses half court. Then there's Kelsey Mitchell, one of the most explosive off-the-dribble scorers in the WNBA. A player who can generate a bucket against anyone in any situation. You've got Lexi Hull bringing two-way impact, smart decision-making, and the kind of steady professionalism that gives coaches peace of mind. You've got Sophie Cunningham, elite shooter, enforcer, relentless competitor, and emotional spark. And then there's Tyasha Harris rounding things out. That's 5 deep in the backcourt with no real drop-off in shooting, physicality, or defensive presence. The backcourt is set. It's dangerous. And it's not the issue. The issue is the front court. Aaliyah Boston is a legitimate cornerstone for a championship-level team. She's an elite defender, a high IQ offensive player, and someone who consistently makes the right reads while punishing defenses with her skill. She can anchor a title run, but she needs help. She needs dependable and physical front court partners who can protect the rim, control the boards, and give her rest without everything collapsing defensively. Right now, those pieces aren't there. Damiris Dantas is on a veteran minimum deal, and let's be real, that's not a true solution. It's depth. It's a temporary fill-in. Indiana still has roughly $1 to $1.5 million in cap space, enough to add 2 players, maybe even 2 solid contributors if they find the right value. Names like Rebecca Allen, Temi Fagbenley, and Brianna Turner are all possibilities. But the rest of the league isn't standing still. The New York Liberty are loading up again, building a roster that's bigger, tougher, and deeper than most. The Dallas Wings added Alana Smith, a co-defensive player of the year candidate, exactly the kind of player Indiana needed, but chose not to max out for. And now Dallas is stronger and more physical up front, and that exposes Indiana's biggest weakness. The front court gap is real, and it's the one thing separating this team from true championship contention. Which brings us to the name you've been waiting for. The second enforcer. The piece that could complete this roster. The player who gives Aaliyah Boston the physical partner she needs. The one who sends a clear message to teams like New York and Dallas that Indiana won't be pushed around inside anymore. That name is Myisha Hines-Allen. And if you haven't been tracking her, here's why this fit makes almost too much sense. She posted on Instagram using Indiana Fever colors. And if that wasn't enough, she crossed out the Dallas Wings logo. That's not subtle. That's a statement. That's someone showing exactly where they're headed. But forget social media for a second. Look at her game. Myisha Hines-Allen is a physical force in the paint. She battles for position before the ball even gets there. She doesn't wait for plays. She creates opportunities through effort, positioning, and toughness. It's the kind of work that doesn't always show up in highlights, but absolutely impacts wins. She finishes through contact, she draws fouls, she rebounds in traffic, not open space, but real contested situations, and holds her ground against bigger players. Pair Sophie Cunningham with Caitlin Clark in the backcourt. Now you've got two enforcers on the floor at once. One protecting your point guard, one protecting your big. Two players sending the same message. If you want to play physical with this team and kept flexibility for the moves that matter most. And if Myisha Hines-Allen ends up where it looks like